Jordan Peterson like 5 times before I could even realize what he was talking about.
We just started. That's going to confuse people. Deconverted man here. And I've got Skeptic. I almost want to call you
Hello.
Skeptic. I've got Skeptic something. Pig, pork. What is Skeptic
Hello.
pork? I wanted to say Skeptic pig. That's not right.
Oh wait, this is live streaming.
That was live, right? We started just as I said. I'm going to start now. Are you ready? You're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And you weren't ready. It's okay. We'll pretend that intro didn't happen. I'll edit it out later. What do you mean I can't edit it out later? It's live. Oh, well. All right. So, yeah, we're going to talk about a little bit about a video we saw of Jordan Peterson because, Jordan Peterson's all over the place, and it's a good starting point to leap off of from that to some probably deconversion stories might be a thing. So, so Jordan Peterson had this video, and I'll have to link it in the description, but it will be there later. And he was asked the question, is God fact or fantasy? And his answer was, maybe it's both. And I had some thoughts about that, but why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about it? Pork. Uh-oh. I can't hear you. Volume went.
Hello.
There we go.
Oh, okay, yeah. I had an issue with my microphone. One thing I have to say before I start, Jordan Peterson is the master of word salads. It took a while for me to decipher what he was saying. Hello?
Yeah.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Better. No, but I think that in summary what was trying to say is that the God as a concept in the mind of people is a fact, is a realistic thing that is a reality of our societies. But God in a sense of being some external part of reality that affects things and that is actually going to like metaphysically affect your reality, that's the different situation there.
Yeah, well, the thing is, he refuses to be pinned down on this particular question, but other questions he's also been somewhat evasive with, and that's become kind of a complaint about him. And maybe he's hedging his bets because, he wants to, continue to be popular with everybody, that's out there to be popular with. He doesn't want to come right out and say that he does believe in God because that might negate a few audience people, and he doesn't want to say that he does believe in God because that would negate some audience, or whatever. So it might be that. It might be a case that, or he might simply think that I don't know why he wouldn't just say that his beliefs are private and leave it at that, though. Because the way he answers the question almost seems like a politician or something, It's like, yeah, well, maybe it's everything. I don't know. I wasn't there that night. You can't prove that I wasn't, or whatever. But I do think that the way I understand it, and the way I've understood God as a skeptic, is that yes, it's a concept that we can hold it in our head and we can think many things about it. But if it's anything other than that, I don't see any reason to think that's the case anymore. I did once, but I think that for Peterson, maybe he's holding out some sort of hope that there is a way that it could be real, or maybe it could become real, or maybe that we would think it's real to the point that it's indistinguishable from reality or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and that is another point that also has to be addressed. I feel like the concept of God has been defined in so many different ways that people literally define it in whatever way it takes for it to be a real thing. And in a way, I feel like that's what Jordan Peterson does. He defines the concept in, like in a way that I don't think he genuinely thinks like there is a metaphysical entity outside of the mind of humans that is controlling the universe. But I do think that what he's saying, there is like some part of your consciousness that he's calling God, and that is the one that is controlling in some way our actions. You understand what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
he's talked a lot about how when enough people get together, there's this sort of like uh, intangible thing forms. And he talks about it in such a metaphorical way that it seems like he's talking about a spirit or a god or something like this. And he talks about morals in this way, that people have to have this abstract thing that we call God to nail down the morals to, that because that's the society has said that this is the greatest good possible, and whatever that is what we're going to aim at. Well, but I don't know why we have to pretend that that's real versus why we can't say yeah, the abstract good is completely abstract, and we know that, and we admit it, and we don't have a problem with that. Uh, I don't know. Maybe there's, again, it's hard to say because he won't, he won't just come out and say what he believes, which he could separate from what he thinks is true, but he won't do it. So what can you do with that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if God, and I've had this where everybody has their own version of God, even within, if you say, well, I'm Christian, well, that doesn't mean anything. You could, what kind of Christian are you? you
I
know.
will go further. Um, where I live, around 90% of the population are some type of Christianity, and around 75% are part of the Catholic faith. Yet, if you go through one block and you ask every single person that believes in a God,
Uh-oh.
going to tell you mutually exclusive or illogical definitions.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can't get, nobody seems able to agree. And the thing is, what that says to me is that it's because God is them. That's where they're basing their God, is on their own self and their own ego. So everybody's God is going to be different because they're basing it on themselves. So if they are a judgmental person, God's a judgmental God. If they're a forgiving, loving person, God's a loving, forgiving God. And so uh, you can tell a lot about a person based on how they frame what God is.
Yeah, I was thinking on making a video about that in the future, but generally it makes a lot of sense because the more you think about it, people usually have their own moral code and they just look at the Bible with whatever preconceived notion they already had, and they think of some way of justifying that preconceived notion with something in that book that they were raised to believe it is actually true. In this case,
Right.
the
and
Bible.
and I mean, that's true of any holy book or text, and any religion that's you can look at new ageism, you can look at pagan ideas, anything that's out there, and people will say they'll pick and choose what they want to be true. I had this talk with a person that believed in some pagan uh, ideas, and they were at least honest enough to admit that they did so because it felt good. Like there wasn't any coherent reason to believe what they believed; they just wanted to. And I didn't see that as, I said that's not a good reason to think something's true, and they agreed. But they're still going to keep believing it despite knowing that. So that says something interesting about the way the human brain works. Perhaps it's something that either helps and it also hinders us in some way. Obviously, uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, my concept of God certainly underwent vast metamorphosis as I was a Christian, and then once I lost that, I could see it better for what it might be. Like if it's an actual thing, it certainly couldn't be anything that any human has come up with, because um it's too mundane. It's
Do you?
Yeah. Anyways.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you aware of what Richard Dawkins defined originally like a cultural unit of information that is
Yeah,
trans?
meme.
Yeah. I was thinking that that is honestly the best way one can describe the concept of a god. It's basically like a meme. It's like a concept that has been going through different minds, has been altered according to preconceived notions of that mind, and it just keeps moving. And I feel like in that sense, it's a fact that God is a part of reality, but in a meme kind of sense, in a kind of sense that is a cultural unit of information rather than an empirical part of reality.
Yeah, and I agree with that idea because it certainly is true that people believe in this and think it's true. And we can talk about this idea. We can try to say what it is or isn't. And if it was, or if it is part of reality, well, then we would find it. And maybe we haven't found it yet. That I could hold that out as a potential idea. But then whatever it is we would find is not the sort of thing that the religions that I know of talk about. So if there is this thing that we would finally label God, it's not going to be anything like the God that the people are expecting to find. It's going to be something totally else. I don't even know what that's going to look like or what that would be. But and it's weird because you get into well, what would convince the skeptic of God, and we can get into, well, would it be nothing, or would it be evidence, or well, any evidence could
Well, the problem
be.
with asking with evidence is that you will get to the same problem that you have seen many YouTubers like. You have seen people in the atheist experience. I think in Bionic Dance at some point said it, and it's like you say you don't believe it because of lack of evidence, but at the same time, if they tell you what kind of evidence will convince you, then their answer is, well, an omniscient God will know what kind of evidence will convince me. I don't have to know that. And it's
Yeah,
like it makes sense, but it kind of sounds like a cop out to me. And I think the real issue there is that the concept really has a lot of significances. So you will have different standards for every single different concept that people will come up with.
right. If we mere mortals were given a cheat code, if you will, to unlock the universe in a way that we could manipulate, matter to our desire. We can always imagine scenarios of how we would make the world be a better place. And it's like the fact that the world's not like that means that if there is this thing that it either doesn't have enough power to do that, or it just doesn't care enough to do it. Because why would there's no although of course theism is very concerned with trying to excuse pain and suffering, there's really not an excuse for pain and suffering. It doesn't need to exist. The only reason it does is because uh well, reality is not shaped for us. We shape ourselves to reality, and that the world we occupy is a rather dangerous one. You can't survive a volcano blast, and you can't just say, well, that you've got, well, free will. No, free will doesn't excuse the volcano blast. I mean, what is
Yeah, I
me
hate that
having
excuse.
it's like, look, I can maybe the free will excuse works for humans killing other humans or doing bad stuff, maybe. But if I'm just sitting there chilling out, minding my own business, and all of a sudden a ton of lava rains down on me, what the bleep did my free will do me then? If I even have free will, So where's that excuse just vanishes in the light of, and they go, well, sin. Okay, well, again, what the bleep did I do? So somebody sin somewhere made it so that I had to die by lava. I mean, what? Why? That's so silly. Come on.
Yeah, you cannot really excuse everything with it. I think it ultimately goes back to our perception of reality. And, I feel like we simply assign significance to our own lives because when you think about it cosmically, we're basically a speck of dust in some far corner of a galaxy, in some infinitely vast universe. That to us, we seem to be something that is like at a level of specialness that makes it so we consider it that there must be something greater than us. That because it's like the way we're raised or something. You kind of understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, well, we are pretty cool in that we are aware that we're aware. I mean, that's kind of neat. We can do pretty interesting things as humans that other things can do to lesser degrees or different ways, or whatever. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
think we do. We plant that idea of the self and humanize nature and conceptualize that the universe is going to be ultimately like us rather than the other way around. We're made of the things of the universe. The universe wasn't made for us. We were made despite the universe. It's just like, we were even made. We just came about because we did, because we could, and to try to find or say that there's a bigger story there. In a way, there is, because there's a lot to learn about reality. But um, I don't need, as say Douglas Adams put it, you don't need to picture fairies to make the garden look beautiful. The garden looks beautiful with or without the fairies. We don't need to add fairies.
No, yeah, and I can agree with that. But I still see how the concept of believing in an afterlife and God and things like that, like I genuinely see how it can be convincing and calling to some people, especially when people like they love die or things like that, and it's like the entire concept just I feel like it originally could have arrived as as an excuse for our undeveloped primate brains to try to look away on to living further because we couldn't comprehend what it's like to not exist and
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, and I was funny because I was just listening to a different combination of different scientists talk about living potentially forever, with using science. And so then there's different ways that you could maybe go about it. One way would be to, get every single thing that you've done online, which Facebook already has, and then that would become a digital copy of you. Well, that's not really me, but it's whatever I did online, which I'm not sure that I want a profile based on that. I don't want a machine version of what I've done online. I don't want that. I don't want to meet that version of me because I've seen that version of me. It's not a good version. But I didn't mean to go to that website. Close. There all these viruses popping up, and so I don't know what that would look like. But maybe it would be just one big pop-up ad. Hey, have you tried this? Click here. Secret doctors don't know. Kill it. But but then a different one, and the one that matters to me would be the one that allows my brain, my consciousness to continue somehow. And the only way it seems to be possible to that is to make my brain able to continue indefinitely. I don't know that I'd want to hang around indefinitely, but at least a while, to be able to, be around long enough to learn everything I want to learn and do everything I want to do.
Yeah, but then
Yeah.
it gets back to the concept. I feel like we're naturally scared of what we don't know, and since no one has ever been able to know what it's like to not exist, we are simply naturally concerned and scared of the concept of non-existing.
I mean, it's interesting when I lost my faith originally, and we can transfer into our deconversion at this point, I think, because that's a good segue. Is that when I lost God, when I stopped believing in God, I for the next few days I would have almost every night I had nightmares about death and dying, and I'd wake up screaming. I mean, just in terror, because my brain, and I understand what it was now, but at the time I was just like, what is going on? Why is, and it was very troubling and upsetting. But what I learned, because I started looking it up and researching, was that my brain is trying to make sense of the new reality that I'm telling it exists. That mortal is mortal. That this is a finite existence. So my brain had to wrap itself around uh, what mortality was, because before, like if I had a dream where I died, even a nightmare, like I remember one where this van hit me, but I still was there, but just as like a spirit. And So that
Oh
was
yeah, I
still,
have.
it was still scary, but I was there. Whereas in these dreams, when I got killed, it was just blackness. And at that point, I woke up, like, like what, So trying to, my brain had to reorder itself after I deconverted for a while and readjust to this new reality of well, what mortality really is, which is a final thing. But I think there is ways to envision it or to experience it. I mean, obviously, when you go to sleep, that's kind of one level of it. But if you ever go under for any sort of surgery, what you do is beforehand, you go, okay, I'm going to really try to remember everything that's going on. And then, like, up until the moment that you get that medication in you, you're like, I'm still here. I'm still here. And then you wake up in your room and you're like,
What the
okay,
hell just happened?
yeah, you're just like, I was there, but now I'm here, and that whole space, you're just not. There is no you. There isn't anything, and so, um, because you're not aware of it, there's literally no anything to fear or anything of you to experience the fact that you can't experience, and the conscious brain doesn't seem to be able to even if you experience that, you still kind of go, well, yeah, but I didn't experience it. That's the whole point. It's a non-experience.
Yeah, and that we are agents that are important to have some appreciation for our own existence. But
Right.
the thing
I think
is
other
that
creatures.
that also means we have no think or knowing what it's like to be the concept of non-existing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, well, it's a non-experience. You can't, even when you're under. Like I said, I've gone under for operation. They removed this little tiny bone that was in my arm, wiggling around. I don't know why. I was like, well, why was it in there? Like, I don't know. It's just it happens sometimes. Like, what's the deal with that? Like, was I growing an extra thumb? Like, what? But it just was a little piece of bone that had broken off or whatever. But and they didn't let me see it or keep it or anything. Anyways, but I mean, I was there counting down from 10 or whatever, and then all of a sudden I'm in my room, and that's it. There's no way to conceptualize nothing in that sense. Um,
Mm.
but and so I guess that is something that can be because we literally cannot comprehend it because there's nothing to comprehend. That might indeed scare people, but um, it shouldn't, and we've got to temper ourselves to the point where it doesn't. Because I came to accept it after those nightmares faded away. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is it. This is the way things are, and it's okay, and I'm okay with that. And you know, uh, yeah. So yeah, that's part of my deconversion, not story, but the process that happened immediately after. Um, you want to go ahead and kind of outline a basic version of your amazing journey from faithful to faithless, or however you want to put it.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So I was raised a Roman Catholic. I remember I had this time where I had this dream. It was similar to yours. I was basically present in my own funeral, and my father was somehow talking with my soul, and I was watching as my body was being moved through the church, and it was really weird because like I was there to experience what my funeral would be like. Yet, as soon as I woke up, I just kept wondering, will I still be there to presence my funeral? Because I was raised with the concept of a soul and all of these things, and it genuinely kept like an appeasing talk to me. Um, I think it was when I was in eighth grade, around 5 years ago. I traveled to the US to an English program to learn about the language and all of that stuff. was the first time that I actually met people from different religions and like became friends with them because in my country most people are Catholic. But like that was the first occasion where I got the opportunity to meet Muslims, to meet Buddhists, to meet Hindus, to meet atheists and deists, and it kind of opened the door for me because I no longer felt like that was the one true thing like that there was to it. I no longer felt like it was the absolute fact in a meme societal sort of way. You understand where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then when I came back to my country and I started to, it was like the first time that I actually started learning a lot of things about the Catholic Church. Like, first of all, until then I didn't even know that they didn't accept contraceptives. I also didn't know anything about the the pedophile priest stuff and all of that. And after I learned that, I didn't call myself a Catholic anymore. I mean, I still attended a Catholic church, but I didn't use the label. I just identify as a non-denominational Christian, and I kept it like that for like a year or so. And then I think it was in class or something when I was in high school. We were in a religious class, and I learned about the concept of a deist. Around that time, I think my rabbit was 6 or something like that. I mean, that wasn't the entire story to it, but I started to try to test out prayer on different occasions. Just try to see if prayer really did work. I mean, I was told it could change criminals. I was told it could save those who you love. I was told all of these amazing things that you can do when it comes to prayer. So naturally, I expected those to be the case. And the more I tested it, the more awkward it seemed. It seemed like it genuinely wasn't doing anything better than chance. So then I simply became a deist. And I just became a deist because I still had no idea how the universe began and I didn't know much about it. So I became a deist, and I suppose just that God created the universe and shepherded it along the way, but he wasn't actively responding to whatever the hell we were doing, or he didn't really care about a small speck of dust in the galaxy.
So then now we had a question. I don't know if you want to answer it. Well, where are you from originally?
Oh,
I don't know if
I don't
that's
know.
info. You don't have to give that info out there.
Well, it's not personal, but I don't think I want to answer it just yet.
Yeah. All right.
I will give it a clue.
It will be a mystery when Pork
no,
gets when he gets let's throw out an arbitrary number.
1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, 10,000 subscribers. He'll reveal where he's from.
Wait, no. There you go. I'm going to give a clue out there. I'm Latino. Latino.
He's Latino. So when he gets Latino amount of subscribers, he'll tell you where he's from. I don't know what Latino amount is, but whatever that is, that's how they'll do it. I mean, heck, we have a talking pig, and that's the question you're going to ask? I mean, come on. But I thought it was interesting that you've called yourself skeptic rather than atheist, because skeptic means a certain thing to me. So I was wanting to know, what does skeptic mean to you?
Well, the way that I think about the skeptic is more like questioning claims, looking for evidence, and not taking anything without enough reason to take a belief or to hold something.
That's it. You got it. Ding ding ding. He gets all the points. Give him all the points. I got nothing.
And the main reason that I call my character a skeptic is because I kind of wanted to I don't know, to address more things. I didn't want it. I feel like I'm not as like, you know how when people ask what atheism is, and the only thing that most people answer is a lack of belief in God.
Yeah.
So I felt like if I call myself atheist, I wasn't really saying anything about my character. I feel a skeptic is a more accurate description when it comes to that.
Yeah, I kind of came to the word skeptic because it was like, as a Christian, I already knew, the sort of flack atheists get anyway. So I'm like, and I'd seen the apologetics like, well, atheist means this and that and whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'm skeptic. Now what? And they didn't have the apologists have no answer to that. So I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I've just removed one little apologetic trick. But that was kind of one reason that I thought that title applied to me better than although I am an atheist because I'm a skeptic, but it's just like a side note on top of it. But I like,
Yeah.
it's interesting to me that, people gravitate towards these different titles because of different reasons. Um,
And that's another thing. It's like when you say you are atheist, you're really not saying anything. You're just pointing out one belief that you do not hold.
yeah.
So you're ultimately not saying anything about your character or yourself or your personality or your interests with that one sentence. So I
Yeah,
I
even
rather
saying
use a
I'm a
label
skeptic
that's
isn't
more.
enough either. I mean, it's a little bit more, but it's still, and the same really is true of Christian, and now that I think back on it, it's like, well, just telling people that I was Christian is like people do assume a lot of things about that. And so, it's this whole exploration of are labels useful or not, and I don't know. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. It's just and maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you consider yourself an anti-theist or do you call yourself an
anti
anti-theist?
yeah, no, I mean, I've talked about this before. I wouldn't say I'm an anti-theist. Well, it depends on how that's defined. But the typical way that it has been defined is like, well, all religion is bad and all belief in God is bad and it needs to go away. Not like we're going to force it to go away by law because nobody wants. I don't think. Well, maybe somebody wants to do that, but I haven't encountered that person. But that typically it's just all religion is bad at every level and all God is bad at every level. And I'm like, well, I don't know. There are atheist churches, and I don't know if they're useful or not. I've never been to one. I do know they exist. Um, so can religion be good? I don't. Maybe, yeah. I know that
Yeah.
there's been churches that have helped me out when I and my family were really hurting for places to be and food and money or whatever. So some churches can benefit society, but it's a complicated question, and it seems like, well, people might need something like a religion. So what we need to aim for then is the best one that we can invent, whatever that is. And so I wouldn't say I'm anti theist for that reason. Then also the
No, but
concept. Yeah.
the
Okay.
thing is that it ultimately comes back to what you define as a religion. Because then it's like, can we make a philosophy system that people get motivated to be part of without actually having the like things that are undemonstrable or things that can potentially be hurtful? And that's the main
Oh,
thing there.
yeah, I think so. I mean, and I think that that's kind of what the atheist churches are maybe trying to do. And again, I can't. I've only seen like one show about it, and I haven't been to one personally. So, anything I'd say is very extraordinarily anecdotal at best. Uh, but it's like, yeah, we can decide to meet at somebody's house and just talk about things and have a good time and even have serious discussions or public places or whatever. And none of that requires believing in weird things. So whether or not it's going to be as organized as religions are today, I don't know. But it seems some people prefer that and some people don't. So in that sense, I would say, whatever works best, let's do whatever that is, but rid ourselves of the bad parts of it as we go. And then the same thing with God is that God's been around as a concept with humanity a long time. And even if tomorrow we all woke up and nobody believed in God, there would be people born because of the way brains work that came to believe in a God. So we're going to have to figure out how to resolve this thing that comes about because of the way we are as people, and to say, yes, this is a thing that you might come to believe, but just because you believe something doesn't make it true, or something like that it's going to have to be something that we learn and teach each other, that yes, you believe this, but that doesn't make it absolutely true. It makes it provisionally true to you, but maybe nobody else. But even then, it's not true in this. Or let's be more precise with our language and not use the word true in that case. Like we're wrapping back around to Jordan Peterson's theory.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
but
I
yeah, I don't. My brother's a theist, and I think that he's one of the, well, I would say the most honest theist that I've ever encountered. His idea of God has evolved, and he has shaped uh, his theology in a way that's like it's like, well, if everyone was doing this, there'd be atheists would be almost virtually out of work. There'd be nothing to complain about, just about, I mean, and it's like, and so I think that it's possible. I've seen that it's possible to reach that level. So I can only hope that it's possible for others. But I wouldn't be an anti-theist for those reasons. Good question though.
yeah. Um, I guess I could answer just since we're in the live stream and everything.
Yeah, you asked me the question, so answer your own question.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't actively consider myself an anti-TS, and I feel like the main reason for that is that being in such a religious country is like people literally get the image of a Stalin or Pao or um, the dictator.
Stalin.
How is this called? Yeah,
Stalin.
people literally get the image of a Stalin if you talk to them with the concept of anti-theism or extreme atheism or whatever that means. And then it comes to things like, do I really want to use a label that has baggage, or do I just want to use a label that is more societally acceptable, and then try to work from them? Because ultimately, it's not so much about the label; it's more like about what you do and what the concept of your position is.
Hmm. But now, of course, you realize that you'll never be able to talk to a Muslim.
I'm haram. I'm haram.
Huh? Bum. Yeah.
Is it because
Because
pork is
you're,
haram?
because yeah, it's pig, and yeah. So
To be
I
fair,
was like,
but to be
there's like,
fair,
I know that joke. Just I waited for the silence to clear because it was like, yeah, that died. It was funnier in my head. Anyways, moving on. Okay, I didn't get to do my deconversion story, but people kind of know that, but I'll do it anyways. Yeah, unless you had more to say on the other thing. Nope. Hello?
oh yeah, sorry.
Oh my.
No, then as I was a deist, I eventually just when I entered to university, I was introduced to Richard Dawkins, but mostly for his work in biology and genetics and all of that stuff. And as I started to read through that, I then went through the rabbit hole of his other beliefs and atheism and all of that stuff. And eventually, after I learned about all of the different hypotheses for the origin of the universe and everything, I simply no longer hold that a deistic God was even a possible explanation. So I even let that go, and I came to be an atheist at that point.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, my deconversion stories. I'm going to shorten it, but basically, I was a Christian for quite some time, and I had made a channel on YouTube called Infinite Hope where I did Christian videos,
Is
and
it still up?
no, it's not.
Oh,
It's gone. I have a few videos from it that I've analyzed myself on this channel. I can give you that playlist if you're interested. But at any rate, um, I was bugged, of course, by those pesky skeptics and atheists on YouTube. All these questions I couldn't answer, and but I firmly thought that I had the truth, and that they just they didn't. These poor atheists, these poor skeptics, they just don't know the truth. And this
those
one,
pesky, those
yeah,
pesky atheists asking
yeah,
questions that you cannot answer and questioning your beliefs.
yeah. Yeah, so I thought, well, what's what, they kept asking for evidence, and I'm like, okay, why don't we give them this? Because they keep asking why, it's like, well, and this one person said something like, we have the evidence, but even if we gave it to them, they wouldn't believe it anyways. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. Let's just give it to them. And then if they don't believe, then at least we've tried. So I spent the next year, which isn't much, but because people try to make big deals of how long research takes them sometimes as apologists, like, I spent 20 years investigating. No, you didn't. I spent a year doing it. Looked into the archaeology and the history of the Bible, and I found that there was absolutely nothing to support any of it. And then it got worse because I found evidence that there were numerous forgeries, not just in historical writings, but also of archaeological findings.
Wait, hold on a second. I hate to interrupt you, but were you ever a younger creationist?
No.
Oh.
I was never.
Keep going.
I was never. Yeah, no, I was never a literalist, Bible literalist, or anything like that. But I believe that the Bible was based on some historical fact of some sort, at least the New Testament, if not the Old. But what I found was that nothing in the New or Old Testament could be confirmed by archaeology, except for a few locations and a few kings, and that was it. Everything else was up for grabs. There was no hard documentation of these people, what they had done, where they had gone, in some cases, where they had lived, and the fact that there was teams of archaeologists that had been sent out by Christian churches that magically found just the right evidence they needed to declare that this or that place was, important biblically, and then they wouldn't let anyone else look at what they found. So it's like, no, that's you. You don't have anything. You're lying. You don't. And the Josephus forgery, and the possible forgery of Tacitus, although I think that's kind of been resolved, but definite forgery of Josephus. You don't make up stuff when you have the truth. You don't lie when you have the truth. You don't need to. So that, I realized, not only was there no evidence, but there was evidence against this, and then there was evidence of fraud. So fraud was happening, now in when these digs were done. Then couldn't fraud happen earlier than that? So I turned to apologetics because that was all I had left, which was these arguments for God. And you've heard them, cosmological argument. Anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, so it has a cause. And then you add other stuff to that, and therefore God comes later. But
and that's another that I find a problem with in every single argument. Is like, it comes from people that start with the conclusion that God exists, and then they just work in a way that the premises lead to that conclusion, instead of
it's
basing
backwards,
it on reality.
Yeah. Well, and for a while, so those arguments, I thought that saved me. But then I learned informal logic, and that killed that. So there you go. That's what. Then I became a skeptic, and here I am.
Interesting.
The Bible is proof of the Bible because it says it is. Well, the Bible is a very well edited group of different stories written by anonymous people that have been collected and changed throughout time until they've reached an agreed upon format that's still being changed and translated even today, that people use in whatever way they want to promote the theology that they think is correct. But I mean, and I've also been known to be a Jesus mythicist, which is like, oh, I can't believe that. No, there's no evidence. No, Jesus didn't exist, and if he did, the sort of person he was nothing like what's recorded, so it might as well not exist. So that's the end of that.
In my position, I wouldn't say Jesus didn't exist, but I definitely don't think that the Gospels are an accurate representation of whatever person they were based afterwards, assuming he did exist.
Yeah, like maybe somebody did, but the thing is, what's great about religion is you don't need somebody that actually existed to start the religion. I mean, Joseph Smith started a religion based on these golden tablets that only he saw, Scientology was started on a couple books written by a sci-fi author who said, I'm going to make a religion. And he did. And it's public knowledge that these books are written to create a religion, yet the religion was created despite knowing that it's made up full cloth because people decided that it was true. So, and you've got cargo cults and you've got all sorts of things like that just uh, show that anyone can believe anything for little to no reason. Paul probably existed, and somebody like Paul, although he might not have been named Paul, somebody like Paul that just came along and said, "Yeah, there's this guy Jesus, and here's what happened, and here's what he taught." That's all it would take to begin the religion. Is for somebody to believe that he was telling the truth. But yeah, there could have been a guy called Jesus. I doubt it though. I've seen too much to
Yeah.
think that it's. But anyways, it's kind of a tangent. Um, yeah, but that's our kind of shortened deconversion stories. What's interesting to me is that as people move away from faith, they seem better able to learn about science and how things work. Because when you're a believer, there's a fear that you might learn something that will destroy your belief.
Yeah, and that's another thing. And that's actually something that I feel like a lot of, well, at least the churches that care about persisting are starting to do more. They're starting to like care about teaching in a way that you can always put a god in there, and it's no longer becoming like a something there is no evidence for, but rather like an unfalsifiable assertion that no matter how much evidence that there is that could be worked out without a god, there is still going to be like a hole that is drilled by you in your knowledge, so you can fit god in. And in that concept is like at the very in some point the idea of god is coming in a way that you can keep it in your brain, like you can put it as an unfalsifiable hypothesis in nearly any occasion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got to be very hyper aware of that. Like, always be willing to question whatever it is you hold most dear. Um, Quite some time ago, this was a long time ago. I don't know if you're familiar with this story, but there was this kid that brought this fake clock to school. It totally wasn't a clock, and it was in this lunchbox that was like metal, and so they thought it was like people. They called the police on him. It's like because it could have been a bomb or anything, and it was this big deal. Oh, he just was doing a clock, and I was like, no, it's not a clock. He absolutely intended for this to happen, and I had this whole narrative that I come up with. And although there was some evidence perhaps to point the way towards the story I was constructing, there was no evidence of the story that I was constructing. But and then I realized one of my viewers was like, "Hey, Deconverted Man, what are you basing this on?" And I'm like, "Well, oh, right." I was like, "Oh, nothing." But it seems, oh, right. I'm in the middle of cognitive dissonance because it's like I was so sure I was right, that it's like everything that I found was like, oh, his father was a political person. Oh, that means my story must be true because, he had political aspirations. So he set his kid up to do this because he knew that the news would get involved. It's like, well, all of that could be true, but I had no real evidence to base any of these ideas on. But it sounded like a good story. And I think that's, when you get into people that believe in conspiracy theories, because the story sounds way cooler than the facts, maybe that they'll go towards or maybe because they don't trust the government or some combination thereof, that they'll go towards the story, and not the fact.
Yeah, yeah, that's very common.
Did you have any? You mentioned young Earth creationism. Was that something that you saw? Because I didn't encounter that until I was a skeptic. So did you see that before or after?
The first time that I saw it was in a debate that Richard Dawkins had with I don't remember what her name was. It was in one of these it was in an interview that Richard Dawkins did on the God Delusion, and a documentary on Channel 4, something along those lines. But it just caught my attention because I couldn't believe that people were literally thinking that God was like 6,000 years old, and it seems like so stupid to me. Like I was taught that Genesis was simply God giving a soul to man instead of literally creating man. Just he just made an ape. He just chose an ape and made it important to him. And so I was, and it's kind of weird. I guess that is one of the reasons why I don't really address younger creationism, and I'm not too interested in addressing it. I just don't know what it's like to be a younger creationist. I have never been one, and I, it's not something I can necessarily relate with in that
In the
sense.
in the Catholic Church, well, it depends which church, but I've heard that they kind of teach you an intellectual way of understanding God. Like you have to learn like the arguments for God and things like that. Was that true in your church, or because it was just one friend that told me like his church was like that? So I don't know.
Well, where I am from, the churches are kind of different, but at the same time unified. You don't really learn anything in church. You just go there to celebrate the mass and things like that. Most of the things I learned in my religious class, because when I was in primary school, I was in a Catholic school, and that's where I learned most of the things. For example, that's when I say that I never took the Genesis literally. I just thought it was like God taking an ape and, well, modifying it so it could be self-aware and worship Him. And then it comes to the situation. Yes, you kind of learn it in that way. Like everything was created by God, uh, and everything as we know it did happen, but God just like chip heard everything along the way to end it up with us in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you found that debate when you were an atheist by then? That you saw that debate, or
I wasn't an atheist at the time that I saw it, but I wasn't a Catholic anymore. I was a
okay, you
deist.
were in between, right, right.
I was, yeah.
Okay,
I no
yeah,
longer believe in a personal God by then.
yeah. I mean, finding out, I was like, what? People believe what? Oh, come on, it just was like even more like, oh, and then the flat earthers thing that's kind of come back with a vengeance. Unfortunately, it's like they found that YouTube existed, and so flat earthers from around the world are coming and talking on YouTube.
Which brings up the pros and cons.
Yeah,
The good thing about YouTube is that everyone can share their thoughts, and the bad
yeah.
thing is that
Well,
everyone can share their
as
thoughts.
long as Google approves it, they can share their thoughts.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, um, I I know that name. I don't know where from. Okay, so let's see what else. So yeah, do when it comes to, let's say, the question of what would it take to convince you that there was a God, is there an answer that you have for that?
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah. I mean, in a way, it kind of goes along with what I answer when I say, "Why do I deny God?" I feel like the first thing that I will need is a definition of God, like
Mm.
a concise definition that is not semantically equivalent with another word. Like those concepts when people say like God is love, and then I just keep wondering, are they saying that God is semantically equivalent to love? Like I can say I got you, or like I got my pets.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or like are
Yeah.
they saying there is some entity behind it?
Let's go make God tonight. You tell your girlfriend or boyfriend, hey man, tonight I'm gonna get you nice and drunk and we're gonna make God all night. And they're
Yeah.
like, what? And they're like, look, I was told God equals love, so I'm gonna use God instead of love from now on. I really, it's like, this is
No, yeah, but then
you,
it comes down to that. It's like
we've been together for 20 years, and I want to say, as you hold up a little box, I God you. Sorry. That's great.
no, No, but that's one thing. Like the first thing I will need is a definition. I feel like the term is simply too ambiguous for me to ask for evidence about anything. And then I guess that after definition, then maybe a set of falsifiable predictions that could prove or disprove the existence of this supposed hypothesis. And then even if all of the predictions are completed, then we'll have to pair that up with any other concept of God or with any other natural and supernatural explanation to see which one ends up being more accurate with the predictions and or which ones are equally compatible and all of that thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's the sort of complex answer that I well, not in those words, but in my own words that I've provided. And it's funny because then the person will be like, well, God is none of those things. It's like, well, then I guess I can't believe in it. It's like it's beyond space and time and beyond your ability to test and beyond this and like, how in the world do you know about it? Well, because I felt it in my brain. Oh, okay, well, whatever. We're done.
Yeah, it's like when you try weed or LSD, you also feel God in your brain.
Yeah, well, yeah, I wouldn't know about that, but it's like, well,
No, but yeah.
if that's just what if it's just in your brain, then maybe it is your brain. Maybe that's all it is, and why not be okay with that? Why not, and so, well, if I don't have a good reason, and the reason I'm going to provide is going to be so is the same thing that I would provide for everything else, but you're going to tell me that God is the exception to the rule? I don't think so. It's too much to swallow. It's too much to say yes to. Well, what else can we muss on about Skeptic Pork? Any thoughts rattling around your brain?
Uh,
Think of
I
questions,
don't really know
people in
anymore.
chat.
Wait, let me see. I think
It's
someone.
funny because you said you were Latino. I thought you were German. So I mean, I don't know, man. See, this is what you get when you assume things.
Oh wait, German.
Yeah.
You are not the first one who tells me that.
Yeah.
I think Godless IO one told me that at some point.
Yeah, well, it's the accent, maybe. I don't know, because when you're not exposed to like a lot of other cultures, I guess you start hearing everybody like a certain way or whatever. I don't know. It's probably just patterns. Like, you could like be like, oh no, like secretly I'm a German, like just mess with people. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Someone asked, what did Jesus know about Paul?
What did
Sorry, what did Paul know about Jesus?
whatever he made up?
No, but then it comes to a story because it's like, at the very least, some of the letters that Paul wrote are also, from what I know, some of the most recent ones, the more closer to the year 30.
Yeah.
So I guess
That'd
that's
be like the
kind of
letters to Galatians and the letters to
on
other churches.
Corinthians.
Yeah, Corinthians. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was trying to get them to follow his theology. He didn't like their theology, and that's what that seems like. So he was using I think because I can't prove it, but I think that he was using the idea of who Jesus was to try to make them come into line with his theology. And what's interesting about that is we never get the letters back. We don't like see the Corinthians go, yeah, we're doing it and it's working great now. We never hear their side of the story. So that's interesting.
Then again, it's also possible that we just haven't found those letters yet. So I
Well,
wouldn't make any claims on that.
there was a very interesting practice about burning things that people didn't agree with back in those days. So those records just might not be there to find anymore.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah. The early Christians were very good at destroying anything and everything that didn't align with their religion. And once they got power, that was the end of it. But not necessarily their fault, because everybody that came before them basically had done the same thing. They took what was there and they modified it to their ideas, and then they destroyed the things that conflicted with their ideas. And I mean, it's one weeps to think of how much history was lost.
Yeah,
Okay, so we talked about deconversion. We talked about that. You out of bacon there? Has all your brain turned into bacon at this point?
My brain has always been bacon.
Your brain has always Is that how that works? I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is not how it works, actually.
Well, we can, if we want to rap, we can. I mean, that's fine. I'm trying to.
Actually, I'm wondering something. Was any apologies like of the modern ones, like Frank Turek, William Link Craig, Ray Comfort? Did any of them like had any influence in keeping you in your faith when you were a Christian?
Well, I mean, the first one I learned about was William Lane Craig, and because he was so prolific, I memorized those arguments first. But I actually had met an apologist who is completely unknown now because he didn't follow the path of apologetics, but I actually had done an interview. I don't know if I still have that around, but I interviewed him and asked him all these questions and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard of back then. Matt Slick, I don't think was even a blip on the radar just yet. Or if he was, I hadn't heard about him. No, yes, I had. I take that back. But that was pretty late in my career on YouTube as Infinite Hope, because I did actually call in to Matt Slick's show at one point and asked him some questions, and he tried to answer them. I didn't walk away feeling like the questions had been answered really, but yeah, I didn't really look at his webpage too much back then, so it was kind of like a one-off deal for that. But all of the arguments that exist for theology, like I looked at, I don't know if I looked at all of them, but I know that I memorized a lot of them. So it's like now it's kind of like I remember enough of them to kind of know them off the top of my head, but I'd still have to look at them to get them right. But
Yeah.
yeah, the arguments that if I hadn't learned informal logic, it's possible I would have been a theist. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I'm very glad I did, because logic has helped me to understand the world a lot better than I ever did before.
Up to a point it does, but then there are arguments like the Kalam cosmological that go beyond logic, and that you actually have to know a fair bit about cosmology and the origins of the universe to be able to refute them.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
It helps, but from deductive reasoning, you can refute it, and with informal logic, you can point out the logical fallacies in the Kalam. But yeah, I mean, it does help to understand some cosmology, because the thing that Kalam is based on is essentially cause and effect. And the problem with that is when you get to the T point in of time, cause and effect might not even exist anymore. And so all physics breaks down. Well, what do you do then? You can't map anything to that anymore. You can't map logic to that. You can't map so-called common sense or cause and effect to that, because you have no idea what that is like anymore, because we don't have physics to tell us anything about it anymore. So how can you make any statement about it when we have no idea what it's even like? So that it breaks down on that level, but it also breaks down
is ultimately
on other levels too.
That is ultimately the main problem with it. Is like it's assuming there is a secondary, like a godly time and an ethereal space where God inhabits, and when He did the action of creating the universe.
Well, there's all sorts of problems with that as well, because if God is outside of time, then there is no when that God can be, and if God is outside of space, then there's no where that God can be. So literally, you've made God into nothing at that point. A simple way I've put it is that if your God requires us to reject any aspect of reality, then that God cannot exist, period. And so that negates a lot of gods out of the picture completely. Certainly the God of the Bible is gone. Other God concepts quickly go too. I don't I don't know that of a God concept that has been proposed that well that can survive the rigors of skepticism, and that's what makes it such a powerful tool.
Well, if you want to go really further, you could say the pantheistic God or panentheism is sort of a definition of God that in some ways is not an external entity. It's like saying that the universe is semantically equivalent to God or some metaphysical energy that runs through a universe. So you, it's like it's no longer something you can disprove that easily, but at that point it becomes something that there is simply no. It becomes like
Yeah,
unfalsifiable.
you'd have to find association causation with all that. I mean, and the evidence really, and that's another thing with the disproving. No, the evidence is always on the positive claim. That's where the burden really lies. A negative claim, it depends how it's worded, but it may or may not have the burden. But it just depends on the wording, and it also depends on the argument that you're presenting. But typically, the positive claim requires the and holds the burden of proof. But it really does depend. Because I don't want to people go, oh well, you don't have to prove, when you say there's no God. Well, in a sense, we don't, because if you think about it, nobody minds when you say there's no goblins or ogres or dragons. Nobody tells you to prove that that's not the case. But when you say there's no God, then they get then they get a hissy fit over it. So I think Dawkins and
Yeah.
others have tried to like lower society's idea of God to the point where it's at the level of a goblin, ogre, or dragon, where maybe somebody believes in it, or maybe somebody wants to, but it's such a non thing anymore that nobody, when you said, oh, there is no that, they would not ask you for the burden of proof to be held. Another way I've put it is like, oh, you want me to prove God doesn't exist? Well, go first. You don't believe in all these other gods, so prove those gods don't exist.
Well, yeah, but I feel like ultimately it goes back to whoever's trying to convince the other person. Like, obviously, if you are an apologist, you have the burden to try to convince the atheist to believe in your God. And if you are an atheist and you are trying to debate with a theist, then you have the burden to prove that their assertion is wrong in that
Yeah,
situation.
right. Exactly. And one thing with apologetics, and I've probably said this at some point, but um, it says it's one thing, but it's actually another. It says it's there to convince the skeptics, but it isn't. It can't, because the skeptics are asking for something that apologetics cannot offer, because ultimately there doesn't appear to be proof. And when we say proof, the sort of proof that we're asking for is not what they could offer us, because their concept negates proof in the first place. They're talking about a thing that can't be tested, it can't be seen, and so whatever that is like, well, that's, you couldn't offer proof of that at all, because you can't show it, so you can't know it. So then if you say, well, it through your brain, what part of the brain are you experiencing God with? If God is so removed from reality, well, the soul, well, where's the soul located? Where's the proof of that? And well, there isn't any, and they've tried different ways to test that idea out. But apologetics pretends to be that it's to convince the skeptics, but I think it's just to make the believers feel like they have an actual case to make when they don't.
I remember a few years ago when I was still a Christian, I saw the movie, the first version of God is not dead. I genuinely feel like
Oh, that
I
was so
was.
bad.
Yeah, I know. But in that moment, I genuinely feel like my faith was reaffirmed and everything. Yet currently, if I was to watch that movie, I could literally just point out every single flaw that I made during the video, and
Yeah, I mean, it's
it leads you to thinking. It's like, are apologies really to convince the skeptics, or are they
no.
just to reaffirm the beliefs of Christians?
Absolutely, it is not for the skeptic. It is not for the atheist. It just pretends to be. It is to just make the theists think that they're right, make them feel better, make them feel like they're intellectual about it. And the thing is, what's sad about it is way back when Saint Augustine really started the movement. Although people say, well, there's apologists that were before that. Not really, not in the sense that I would use the word, but at any rate, he realized that the atheists of his time, the skeptics of his time, were using logic to talk about things, and that he wasn't. And so he wanted to talk their language, and then he wrote his proofs of God, which are all bunk now, but at the time they were pretty decent because people didn't know as much. And so for the first time, the theist and the non-theist were talking the same language. The problem is the theist, the modern apologist, has not updated any argument at all, period. They're all old arguments that have been demolished and debunked multiple times on multiple levels in many various of analysis in every single which way. And the weird thing is they cling to these arguments as if they're gospel. Like, no, the argument's not flawed. There's no fallacy in it. Yes, there is. It's right there. I pointed it out 20 times. No, it's fine. It's like, ah!
And they still expect you to get convinced by it, which is the funny part.
Yeah, well, and again, I think it's for the fence sitters and for the people looking for a way to rationalize their faith, as I did, and that's why, for me, because logic deconverted me, that's what I try to, offer in my own humble way on my channel with different things I do is, explain, fallacies and logic and how it works and, what its use is and all that. I don't know if I do it very well, but I do the best I know how to do. And so, it's like, well, your method of doing things on your channel is going to be your own method, and you're going to use your own techniques to try to reach people that believe, and that's what, it's like, that's what we share in common, but we might not share anything else in common.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I guess I could ask you one last question before we finish with the lesson. What inspired you to make a YouTube channel and start talking about why you hold the beliefs that you hold and all of that stuff?
When I was a Christian or now?
No, the current one. Well, the converted one.
I mean, that one. Yeah, well, I mean, I've been doing YouTube almost since it started. Like, I remember when the creators of YouTube made a video and they were like explaining and welcoming people to YouTube, and it was just starting out. So I've been involved with YouTube since then. So I've always made stuff, but I made Infinite Hope because I wanted people to experience God. I didn't want them to miss out on that. What I came to realize later when I deconverted was there's some people that can't experience that thing that people call God because it's some sort of thing that happens in your brain, and different brains are wired in different ways. So some people will never be able to experience it. And that makes perfect sense on evolution, but makes no sense if you try to come at that from a theistic point of view. Because basically you're saying God has made people that can't experience God, yet God wants nothing more than for us to experience God. Yeah, that makes sense. Not. But then, of course, with Deconverted Man, I wanted to I wanted to help the me that's out there. There's someone like me out there when I was a Christian that needs to know the things I know now. And hopefully my humble words will reach that person, and who knows if they will or won't. Maybe I'm just talking to other atheists and skeptics for all I know. I hope not.
Yeah, you never know.
All right, now you have to answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, I guess even a few words can go some really far way in the right hands. I think that originally I started my originally started my channel because I was, after listening to so many YouTubers like the Messianic Maniac and Logic and all of this, I just genuinely feel like there were things that were left unsaid that I could just add to it. And I feel like going to original video and leaving a comment was simply not enough for any commentary to be in any way explicable or potentially useful to anyone. So I decided to make my own channel to address those arguments that I feel like I could add to what other people have already said.
All right. Well, remember, I know some logic, so I'm going to be looking at your arguments. So you better make them good ones.
Hey, if I'm wrong, let it be.
Yeah, exactly. Point
that's
it
the
out.
point.
Absolutely.
That's the point.
Absolutely. But always do so with logic and reason. And if we don't have empirical evidence, if we don't have a repeatable test, and if we don't have a valid and sound argument, we should be skeptical of the conclusions. Thanks for listening, everybody. Subscribe to Skeptic Pork. Do you have a Twitter or anything else you want to yell at people to do?
Yeah, why the hell not? You can look me up on Twitter at skeptic_pork.
Yeah, I'll put that in the. I'll put your Twitter thing in the description as well. And do you have any secrets you don't want us to find out about?
Oh yeah, and I'm definitely going to let you know right now.
And remember, if we get him to 10,000 subscribers,
I'm not making any promises.
20 million subscribers.
Not making any promises even then.
Then something, then he'll reveal his location where he was, not his current location, but and he'll do so in a cryptic anagram that you have to solve using mathematics and quantum physics. They're like, that's what you should do. Like throughout your videos, there'll be like a hidden symbol somewhere in the video. Like, like if you've collected them all since you first started, then you can figure out where I used to live.
Well, yeah, that brings me back.
All right. Anyways, thanks for doing this. It's been good to talk to you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Maybe we can repeat it at some point or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. And
bye, the converted man.
Bye. I'm hitting this button, and then